Hey, I'm Cyclon, and there seems to be some interest in crafting the entire set of gear for the Tornado Shot Deadeye variant of mine. Now, I originally planned to release this video actually before launch, but I didn't got to it in time, then launch happened, so now I'm finally going to make the video and will allow you to craft the full gear, covering item level, fracture, why we want to fracture specific things, cheap early crafting ends, or how you can finish the GG items. Everything will be done in Craft of Exile, but of course there will be a POB in the description for the full build guide that if you don't have it at hand, you can grab there. If you're interested in my Tornado Shot variant and you found this video before you found my build guide, I'm going to leave an info card I think around that corner about this moment that you can check out. Now, let's start with one of the most important items, the body armor. I guess before we go to the body armor actually, I should mention something. By no means just because you know the crafting steps they're gonna end up cheaply. These items can cost anything between a few divines and up to 20 divines. Last league for a really good quiver that I made, or actually fairly good quiver, it wasn't really good, but it was pretty good. I spent 25 or 26 divines on it. For my body armor last league, I spent 10 divines on it. Now this league is of course different, prices are different, the league is still younger than when I finished my crafts last league. I just wanted to warn you that by no means I'm expecting these crafts to be cheap, and you should farm before you're going to do these crafts. Get enough funds so you can refill your next farming strategy or next farming session, and then only use the spare currency to craft the gear as needed. Alright. Starting with the body armor. The body armor we want to be at item level 81 or 86. 81 is the cheaper variant, 86 is the more expensive variant. 86 would allow us to hit T1 spell suppression and T1 life. However, getting a fractured T1 body armor with these dropped is very low, so likely at 86 T1 fractured chaos res body with a T1 fractured chaos resistance body armor with T1 capabilities, so item level 86 or above, should be quite rare, and that's quite expensive. So we can stick to 81 because those can drop while farming Legion, and we're going to look for a chaos res fracture. Nope. Going to need to enable fracturing. The reason why we want chaos res fracture is that we want for our suffixes to be chaos res, spell suppression, and a third suffix of our choice. Now, if we would go for spell suppression fracture, the result would be that we need to roll chaos res. If we roll chaos res, we actually are looking at, let me select it, we would look at quite a few tries. But if we are actually going to have chaos res fractured and look to its spell suppression, the tries we need are quite a lot less. So this is because spell suppression actually has a higher rating than chaos resistance. So this is why we want to roll for spell suppression and have chaos resistance on the body armor. Now that we have defined that, let's go over to the emulator and take a look at the crafting step by step. So, we want to use a full dragon scale, a general's brigand, I don't know, brigand, I'm just going to call it that, or a triumphant lamella. Personally, I recommend the triumphant lamella, but because it is the best body armor variant for this craft, it is also going to be the most expensive. They are all good for this. Either one is going to be fine, they all have high armor, high evasion bases, but the Triumphant Lamella has a higher evasion than armor and will be the most fitting for what we want to do. Again, if it's too expensive, the other body armors are totally fine. This will just be, if the cost is no different between these three options, you can go with the Triumphant Lamella. Now I'm assuming it's going to be 6-linked, or you're going to 6-link it yourself afterwards. I do recommend for 6-linking to have 28 or 30 quality on the body armor. You can use perfect fossils for that, or you can use a Hillock body armor craft over the Syndicate for this. Now, once we have our body armor, once we have it with our T1 fractured chaos res, we are going to start working on the suffixes. Now, something that is really great for all our items is that we can use modular crafting. which means that we can go step by step. We first finish the suffixes, then go for the prefixes, and end on the implicits. So for the body armor, we have already one guaranteed suffix that we want. Now we need to get to the other suffixes. If you take a look at my build guide, I recommend having either on the helmet or the body armor an Essence of Loathing. Now, the Essence of Loathing allows us to have mana reservation efficiency. You can grab it on the body armor, or you can later use it on the helmet. The helmet has a bit less mod pressure, so if you are low on budget, using it on a helmet is going to be cheaper. If you have a lot of budget, using it on the body armor is going to be the better choice. For this example, for moving further with the example, it doesn't matter. If you don't want to use Loathing on your body armor, if you don't have that much of a budget to craft your body armor at the moment, it's totally fine. You can use an Essence of Rage, Sorrow, or Spite for a T1 stat, which is also perfectly fine. And if you check out my current character in-game, it is actually what I'm still using as well. If we take a look here, my character currently is using an Essence of Intelligence with T3 Spell Suppression. I didn't need it to upgrade it further, so I kept it as in this state. But anyway, we can now use our essences, and we're going to use these essences until we hit T2 or T3 avoidance. T3 would be our saddle, which we stop at if we are low on budget, and T1 would be our high budget. T2 would be our high budget on this 81. Because, again, 86 would be high budget and would be quite expensive just to start out. Eventually, going to cheat here a bit, eventually we're going to hit T2 or T3 Spell Suppression. Once we've hit our Essence, our Chaos Weapon, and our Spell Suppression, our suffixes are done. Now we can move on to the prefixes. For the prefixes, we have the following situation. It could be that our prefixes are filled. If our prefixes are filled, don't worry, we can fix this. We're going to apply 1 Ember of any tier, it doesn't matter what it rolls, but this will result in the Seeing Exarch to be dominant. If we use a Chaos, an Eldritch Chaos, an Eldritch Exalted Orb, or an Eldritch Annul Orb, it's only going to affect the prefixes. Our suffixes are going to be safe, which means we cannot screw over our suffixes anymore by further crafting on the body armor. Once we have this, we want to do one of the following. We are going to end cheaply, which will only cost us like a few more divines, and then the body armor is done, and this is the state I'm currently still using, so it's totally fine to end cheaply if your budget doesn't allow to go further. Or we can go expensive. I'm going to cover the cheaply first and then the expensive. Feel free to skip ahead if you have a high enough budget and don't need the cheap version. So, for the cheap version, we are going to craft the prefix. Suffixes cannot be changed on the body armor. This is going to cost us 2 divines. When we have that craft, we're going to use a Veiled Chaos, and it's going to result in likely no prefixes, veiled, and 1 railed prefix. We then can use to craft Block, which is a prefix that is very likely to appear spell block or tech block. They claim the same space, so either craft is fine, and then we're going to Unveil. On the Unveil, we hope to hit Avoidance. If we hit Life with Armored Evasion, if we hit Max Life or Max Mana, this is things that would be a brick in this case. I get to it in a moment. But we want to get Avoidance. When we get Avoidance, we then are going to craft the prefix physical damage from hits taken as fire damage and physical damage from hits taken as lightning damage, and this would be our cheap body armor. Now, if you don't get the Avoidance Unveil, we are going to need to use an Eldritch Annulment, because our Seeing Exarch is dominant, we don't risk our suffixes, and clear the prefixes out and do the suffix can be changed Veiled Chaos again. You can directly do the Veiled Chaos if you have an open prefix. Of course, then you don't need to clear out the prefixes with the Eldritch Annulment. Now, the reason why we don't want a percentage life and crafted avoidance on this stage is that when we don't have any life on the body armor, we can actually use the Life Mastery, which again I also have in-game. We can use the Life Mastery to get 15% increased maximum life if we don't have any life modifiers on our body armor. If we have percentage life or low life roll on the body armor, that won't work, so this is why we try to avoid those in the cheap option. Now at this point the cheap body armor is done and you can move on to the next item. If you want to go for the expensive body armor, of course, now it gets interesting. Instead of crafting, suffixes can be changed. We are going to use Eldritch Annulments to clear out our prefixes. Then we are going to craft the prefix crafting increased percentage armor. We can use the lowest tier of percentage armor, and then we're going to use an Exalt to slam once. If we hit a high life, that's wonderful. T2 life, T3 life, those are what we're looking for now. We're going to keep this and move on to the next step. However, likely is that it's going to take a few attempts. So what we do if we don't hit it, we're going to remove our craft, we're going to use an Eldritch Annulment again to clear out the prefixes, keeping our suffixes safe. Then we're going to craft the armor again, we're going to Exalt Slam the life again, and we're going to repeat this till we hit T2 life. Once we've hit T2 life, or T3 life, we are going to craft suffixes can be changed. And now instead of a Veiled Chaos, we are going to do an Iceling Slam. With the Iceling Slam, we hope that our T2 life or T3 life isn't the one removed, but the suffix cannot be changed craft is removed. If we sadly hit our life, which can happen, it's a 50-50 chance, we need to go back to getting a T3 or T2 life on the body armor. This step can be quite expensive until you hit it. If you get lucky, it can be cheap, but most likely you won't be lucky and it will cost you some currency to get this done. This is why I recommend this as an expensive option and not as a cheap option. Once you've hit your T2 life, we again going to block life, block attack damage or block spell damage. We're going to unveil, and we hope to unveil percentage avoidance. If we don't unveil percentage avoidance, which can happen sadly, we need to annul, hopefully not hit the life, and repeat the Iceling Slam. If we hit a percentage avoidance, then the body armor is done. If we hit percentage life, which can happen as well, we have an alternative. We can keep the percentage life, and we need to get a bit more expensive on our boots, but the body armor would be done. This would be again a settle, but depending on how much currency you spend on the body armor already, the settle might be reasonable. So again, on the body armor, on the unveil, we either want to hit percentage life and settle, or we want to do it until we hit percentage avoidance. Once we hit avoidance, or once we hit the life and we are done with it, once we hit percentage life, we're going to craft avoidance. If we hit avoidance, we can either craft percentage life, or we can craft the physical damage from hits as taking as fire and as taking as lightning again. This would be a finished body armor. Now that we have finished the body armor and we now know what avoidance we have unveiled on the body armor or crafted, we can move on to the boots. The boots are going to be item level 85, allowing us to roll T1 spell suppression, T1 chaos, and also a high movement speed and life. We are going to look on the boots again for fractured chaos res. It's the same reason as for the body armor. Having it rolling for spell suppression is easier than rolling for life. So you can see again here, spell suppression has a higher rating than chaos res, so we're re-rolling for spell suppression, not for chaos res. We have chaos res fractured. The base of our choice in this case is going to be Hydro Scale, Dragon Scale, or Two-Tone. Two-Tone is likely going to be very expensive, so expect to settle on Dragon or Hydro Scale. Those are the highest base armor. If you have on low budget, any base is fine honestly, but I will definitely recommend sticking to the higher options to have a decent amount of base armor and base evasion on the item. We are going to stick to the item level 85 as mentioned. And once we have the item, we are going to again head to the emulator. We have our spells, we have our chaos res. We are going to again use Essence of Loathing. Essence of Loathing here will guarantee avoidance. So with avoidance on the body armor, avoidance rolled on this, and our tree, we already are going to be at 80 avoidance. We're going to be slightly over. So all we're going to need to finish capping our avoidance at 100% will be, what was it? I think Lesser Eldritch Ichor. There we go. Lesser for 17 if we have a decent roll on our body armor and a decent roll on our boots. If we don't have a decent roll, we might need to use a greater to get the same, but getting it at a slightly higher level, so that we have an about 20% roll on this to have our avoidance capped. Now this will be based on when we finished rolling the boots. For now we have our boots and we're going to essence craft them. We're going to use Essence of Loathing until we're going to hit our spell suppression suffix. It's the same as with the boots, it's going to take some time, but eventually we're going to hit it. I'm going to try a few before I cheat. Yeah. As I'm in Craft of Exile, I'm going to cheat here again. I'm just going to say we've hit it after a few essences. Of course, for you, likely not. And like with the body armor, here again, you can settle on T2. You don't need to force T1. You can still be spell suppression capped with T2, thanks to the mastery that giving you 15% spell suppression when all your body armor, helmet, gloves and boots are evasion based, which is why we use armor evasion hybrids, because armor is nice for additional defenses, but evasion is our main focus. Once we have the suffixes done, we have the avoidance, the chaos resistance, spell suppression. It's again like with the boots. By using one lesser Eldritch Ember or any Eldritch Ember, we are getting into modular crafting again. Our suffixes are now safe, so we can safely clear our prefixes with an Eldritch Annul. We only need one open prefix. If we already have it, we don't need an Eldritch Annulment here. What we're going to do is we're going to craft the prefix. Suffixes cannot be changed. And then we're going to use a Veiled Chaos. The reason why we don't need to roll for decent life on the boots is that the difference between a T1 life roll and a crafted life roll is very minimal compared to the body armor. So we're going to do a Veiled prefix. We then are going to craft the prefix mana. Again, lowest roll is enough. And we're going to unveil. On the unveil, on the cheap version, any movement speed is fine. If we are going for the expensive version, you want to roll for unveil for movement speed and increased movement speed if you haven't been hit recently. Once we have that, we are going to craft life. Again, either on the cheap or the expensive version. In this case, the expensive is just keep doing suffix can be changed Veiled Chaos until you hit higher movement speed. So yeah, just repeat that step until you get a movement speed you're happy with. Then we're going to craft life. Again, crafted life is going to be very close to, just need a few rolls on it, very close to normal life. Only difference I think was, yeah, instead of 70, which we're going to have was crafted, we could have 89, which is a 19-point difference, which is not nothing, don't get me wrong, but it isn't that extreme that we need to force this with making the boots even more expensive. Once we have our crafted life, our movement speed, our avoidance, chaos resistance, spell suppression, we can take an exalt and slam the last mod. It doesn't really matter, we don't really need to do this further. If we want to continue crafting these boots at a later stage, we still have the crafted life, which we can do, suffix can be changed and can go again where we left off. Now this will result in the boots done. Now again, based on how we roll our body armor, our boots, and then have 20 on our tree. In this case I have 32. The body armor could be 31, then I only need a lesser. If the boots would have rolled 31, the body would have rolled 31, I would have needed to use a greater Eldritch Ember, a greater Eldritch Icon now to finish getting that avoidance implicit. So we're going to roll this for the avoidance. Going to, of course, take some time, as this is always the thing that's most unlikely to roll. Except if you don't need it, then you're always going to get it. But eventually you're going to roll it. Not going to continue here. I think you get the example. You're just going to get it eventually, then you're going to use Eldritch Ember to get something like action speed or movement speed for the other implicit, and the boots will be done. Now that our boots and body armor are finished, we now are avoidance capped, we have a decent life total, and we are already in a pretty good state. Which allows us to move on to the helmet. The helmet, like the boots, we want item level 85. We again want strength stack space to have a bit of armor on top of our evasion rating. And we don't want a fracture here. A fracture here would be very expensive because we do want the helmet enchantment instead. Our preferred is the Tornado Shot enchantment, but if you like to stick to Lightning Arrow, of course you can use a Rage enchantment, or you can use a Blood Rage enchantment, or whatever you prefer. I would recommend the reduced rage loss for Berserk, if you're using Lightning Arrow instead of Tornado Shot. But if you're using Tornado Shot, definitely go with the +1 secondary projectile for Tornado Shot. Once we have our helmet with the enchantment, we can again move over to the emulator. We want either a Nightmare, a Big-Faced or Flutant. In my case I think I went with Flutant, but here Nightmare or Pig-Faced are both equally good. Now Nightmare has a bit high evasion rating, but so normally enchantment services go with a Pig-Faced, and randomly either one is fine because Tornado Shot enchantment is a bit more expensive. We are a bit more lenient with our base choices. Once we have our item, we are with enchantment, assume there's enchantment on here, we are going to go back to essence crafting. Now again, you can either use an Essence of Losing for the reservation efficiency if needed, or if you don't need reservation efficiency, we can use an Essence of Envy to guarantee Chaos Rest to get our Chaos Resistance as high as possible. We're going to do this now for the cheap stage, pretty much just as long as we don't get anything decent. At the moment we get a decent life, we're going to stop. For example, let's try to get something here, something decent. Well, could I get a high life roll please, game? Or Craft of Exile? Here. So I would hit T2 life, Chaos Res, open prefix, that would be decent. For the early stages this is more than enough. If you need reservation efficiency, you would do the same with Essence of Loathing. Now, you could, if you don't need Chaos Res or reservation, you could look for like high life and life regeneration, or really life recovery rate or anything like that. It is just additional survivability. And then we're just going to craft again something for defensive, such as a prefix, which means we can craft +1 AoE gems to get +1 level to our auras that we then socket at our helm, or we can craft the, where is it? Was it a suffix on the helm? Can't seem to find the mod I'm talking about. I'm confused. I know it's there. There it is, sorry. Physical damage from hits taken as fire damage. This is again something to improve our EHP, as we have better resistances as elemental damage as physical damage. After evasion and the damage will hit us, we don't have that much armor, so taking physical as elemental does help us quite a bit. So helmet is really just a cheap out item. We have the enchantment, we roll it for decent chaos res, spell suppression, stats, resistances as needed, and then have a decent life. My in-game helm is nothing to gloat about. This one has just a high amount of life and having some reservation efficiency and crafted resistance. If you want to min-max your helm, you would look like rolling Essence of Loathing until you hit a high chaos resistance. Now this will cost you, like shown on the boots, like shown on the body armor, this will take some time, or you can get like high double stats. And when you're happy with that, you're going to use the same trick on the body armor. We are going to have 1 Eldritch Ember on the item, clear the prefixes out, craft armor, Exalt Slam, and repeat this until we hit our high life on the helmet. And when we hit our high life on the helmet, then we are going to be happy. We're going to craft the other prefix, we're going to slam the last prefix, and that will be the end of the helmet. The helmet is really one of the cheapest items to get. The reason why we cheap out that much on the crafting process is because the base item is fairly expensive. Finally, moving on to the Quiver. The Quiver is actually something that I only learned last league, but we can do quite something amazing there. So if you look at Quiver with an Essence of Torment, we don't want Fractured Chaos Rest in this case, but we want one of the following. Either we want Fractured Bow, a bow attacks fire an additional arrow, or additional crit strike with bows. So critical strike multiplier with bows, or bow attacks fire an additional arrow. Either fracture is going to be fine because we're going to roll for the other. If we are looking here with Essence of Torment, rolling for +1 arrow is going to take us with a confidence of 63, so this is again in a lot of tries. The more you try, the closer you're going to get on the average. We're going to get +1 projectile while having the essence and while having our fracture. If we do it the other way around, if we fracture bow attacks and we try to roll for critical, we're going to need to spend less essences, but our base is going to be more expensive. This really is if you want to spend less on essences or if you want to spend less on the base, this is really your choice. It also will depend on what quiver you're going to use as base. My personal favorite is a feathered arrow quiver because of the projector speed also affecting our projectile damage. But you can use a primal for damage, you can use a broadhead for attack speed, you can use a blazing for fire damage. There are a lot of options you can use here. So then we use Essence of Torment for high lightning attack damage and we head back to the emulator. Let's go with my example of feathered. Where is the feathered? There's a feathered. So we have our quiver of item level 81 to above because 81 allows the high bow damage that we want. We are going to have our fractured +1 bow projectile or crit multi, either one is fine. We're going to then need to get it rare, spam it with Essence of Torment until we hit the other. The reason why I went with bow damage in this example is so I need to spend less example time until I hit a crit multi. Just going to roll till I get one crit multi to show then the continuation of the example. If the game allows me to actually get one. There we go. Assume this is T1 crit multi because here we get exactly the example I wanted to show. Now what can happen, or whenever I tried it will happen, is that you're going to hit 3 suffixes. We need to have an open suffix. So in this case, there's only one option, it is to hit the annulment. We don't have Eldritch, so we need to hit a normal annulment. And we need to get lucky and not hit our lightning damage with attacks and not hit our crit multi. If we hit any other prefix, that's fine, we need those empty anyways. And if we hit either of the 2 we want to keep, then we need to repeat the step. If you get lucky and you hit the proper annulments, your finished item should look like, or your current stage of the item should look like this. 1 prefix, and then 2 suffixes. Bow damage, crit multi, and lightning damage to attacks. If you have more prefixes that don't have the attack tag, which is bow damage or life, that's totally fine, we get to those now anyway. What you can do is now use the suffix cannot roll attack modifier craft. And this will allow our exalts and annulments to only hit bow damage and life. As you can see here, I hit T2 bow life and T4 bow damage. If I annul, it can only hit those as well except the craft. Of course, if you remove the craft, you need to craft it again. This is why this stage can get very, very expensive. Because now that we've gotten our suffixes and our prefix, our attack damage prefix done, we're going to slam an Exalted Orb until we hit either at high bow damage or high life that we are happy with, and then slam an Exalted Orb again and hope for a decent outcome of the other. If you need life, you're going to slam till you get a high life and then accept any bow damage you get after. If you don't need high life, you're going to slam a high bow damage and accept any life after. So in this case I got T3 bow damage, I'm fine with that, so I'm going to slam life. This case is a T4, this case is a T3, this case is a T5, so you can hit any life and you're going to stay with that. And then you're going to craft your last suffix, which can be a stat, can be a resistance, or it can be the crit chance with the chance to get a frenzy charge, which would mean that you don't need your frenzy mana forged arrow setup anymore, freeing up some gem spots, or can just be attack speed. Either one is fine, this goes to personal preference. So in this case, let's say I went with attack speed. So now we have attack speed, crit multi, bow attack, fire an additional arrow. I forgot to slam the last life. There we go, last life, attack speed, and light. This would be the perfect quiver, except of course, could be higher life, could be higher bow damage, but this is whatever at this stage. Having that high lightning damage, having the additional arrow and the high crit multi is already making this a very powerful quiver. Of course, just like with other items, you can settle on other things. In this case, I got very unlucky with my essences, and I just started slamming some random stuff on the quiver, and I ended up with this, which is in my current state totally fine. But of course, you can, just as I shown just now, can craft this in a better stage. Alright. Now, finally, this leaves us with two items that still need to be crafted, the bow and the ring. Covering the bow next, we want an item level 82 bow. Two-handed bow. The base of the bow should be either a spine bow or an ivory bow. You can also optionally go for a bone bow. The difference between a bone bow, bone bow, ivory bow, or spine bow, there is no difference if you go elemental. If you go physical, there is a difference. If you want a physical bow, spine bow is the only option. But because we are an elemental build, we don't care about that. So the bone bow has the same crit chance and attacks per second than the ivory bow and the spine bow. So these bases have a high attack and a high base crit, which is a perfect combination for our elemental bow build. For the sake of the example, let's go with spine bow, but again, any of these three is fine. We want then either a T2 fire fracture or T1 fire fracture, of course, works as well. A T2 T1 fire or lightning fracture. Best case would be a high T1 lightning fracture, because the lightning has a very high variance and we don't want to divine our items. So getting a high T1 lightning fracture is the best outcome. But getting a T2 or T1 fire fracture would be totally fine as well. The roll and the T of the fracture heavily increase the price, so go for one depending on your budget. Once you have chosen your bow of choice, you're going to continue. You're going to use essence of, depending on your fracture, of either Rev if you fractured fire, or you're going with, where is it? Anger if you fractured lightning. We're then going to spam this essence until we hit a high cold damage. So we're going to settle on T3 or better cold damage, or if we want to finish, go for T2 or better cold damage. So this would be guaranteed fire damage, fractured fire damage, guaranteed lightning damage, and high cold damage. We're going to do this again until we're going to hit all three and be happy with the base. So in this case, I have my fractured fire damage. I'm going to use Essence of Rev, running for lightning, combined with a decent cold. Now, of course, as you can see, this will cost you a few attempts, but eventually you're going to hit it. Just going to roll a few until I get a decent example. So now I had my cold damage. We're going to just assume it's actually a proper level, so this video doesn't get any longer. Then we have already our high elemental DPS prefixes. Now that we got our prefixes, we need to work on the suffixes. The way I like to do it, of course, first I use the suffix craft, prefix can be changed, and then I scour the item to have only the prefixes. Now, if you are cheaping out, if you need to do this early and just want a decent bow base, you don't need to do this step. Instead, what you can do is you can craft the suffix additional attack speed and you'll be done with the bow. Just decent prefixes like T2 prefix, T1 essence, and T2 fracture prefix combined with attack speed, if I find it. Here we go. It's already 110 elemental DPS bow. That is totally fine. But of course, if you don't want this, you can remove the suffixes. You then can do the, again, prefix can be changed. And use harvest, add remove speed. This is if you want to go expansive, which I only recommend if you have a very high fracture, a very good essence rolled, and a very good cold damage rolled. You're going to do this, and you're going to have to, again, clear your suffixes, do this, until you hit, oops, I fucked up there, until you hit a T3 or better attack speed. Now this can get very expensive, and usually is not worth it, but this is for the final step of the bow, before we would go for a mirror tier bow. As you can see here, I got very, very unlucky. This was like I don't know, 15 divines, 20 divines down the drain if I would have crafted this manually. But eventually you're going to hit your attack speed. And then we can finish the bow with the craft of, if I can find it, strength, intelligence, and crit chance. And this will then be the finished bow, having an 8% base crit, 1.5 base attack, and a 1.1 base elemental damage. This would be the finished product of our bow, which we would keep. This is literally the bow that you can use all the way until you get a mirror tier bow that would be like this, but slightly better and +2 projectiles. Now this finally brings us to the last item. Video has been long enough, so let's go over this quickly. We are going to need a ring. The ring I recommend is an Amethyst ring. You want an Amethyst ring and you want a T1 Dexterity, Intelligence or Strength Fracture. You want to look for those with no quality, so you don't accidentally go for a low roll that just got amplified with quality. You're instead going to imply quality with intrinsic catalyst yourself. So look for a ring that has T1, T1 Strength, Dexterity or Intelligence fractured, and this will be your starting base. Once you have that ring base, you're going to use an Essence of Scorn to guarantee crit multi, and you're going to roll for either T2 of the other one. Now, if you have a lot of currency, you can roll for T1 of the other one, but either T2 is fine. It's going to cost you a few essences, which will result in a T2, T1 stat, T2 stat, and crit multi on your ring. Now, again, final heading to the emulator. We have our ring here. This ring is going to be at least item level 82 because we need that is the level where we roll T1 strengths. We have hit our essences. We have gotten a decent stat. Let me show. There we go. Assume this intelligence is a higher roll, and we have gotten lucky and our prefixes are not filled. If our prefixes are filled, we need to slam an annulment. Hopefully not miss it and remove our suffixes. If our prefixes are if we have one open prefix, we can do suffixes can be changed, veiled chaos. Notice usually results in only the veiled prefix, but in this case I got added damage. If that happens, that's totally fine. What we're going to do is, assuming we did not hit that, we only hit the veiled prefix, we are going to craft mana. We're going to unveil. Now this can happen. If you do this, you need to repeat this, but we want to, normally we unveil live. Like in, I think 80% of cases we get unveil live. 1 out of 2, 2 out of 3, 2 out of 4, 3 out of 5. Most of the time we do get it. So we're going to get the unveiled live, which is slightly better than the craft. Then we can craft mana cost for non-channeling skills. And finally we're going to Exalt Slam. And because we Exalt Slam the last mod, it's okay if it hits a last modifier already. We just need 2 open prefixes, 1 for the veil and 1 for the craft. If the last prefix is filled, that's okay because we slam it anyway. And this is how you get your decent ring with like high stat, double high stat, crit multi, life, and mana cost. That's really all there is to it. Now you can cheap out just like I did. Instead of going for Amethyst ring, I went for Intelligence ring, for a Coral ring, and I rolled Essence until I hit Chaos Resistance. So I rolled the Dex Essence until I hit Chaos Rest, and then I did the prefixing, but I got unlucky, so that's why I still haven't finished my prefixes and just crafted live. This would be how you cheap out on the ring. But the ring is one of the final items you craft, so usually you don't need to cheap out on it. Alright, and that is how you can craft the full gear. This video was pretty long, I apologize for that. But if I've forgotten any item that you're asking how to craft, if there's anything left to question, as always, feel free to ask me in the comment section. Feel free to ask me on Discord via DMs or via just on the appropriate channel on the Discord. I will try to answer as quickly as possible. But of course, if you don't want to do any of that, you can as always message me in-game. My current in-game name is Cyclon Trial Master. And with all that being said, have a wonderful day and goodbye.